Welcome, everyone. I'm Ashish Kaushal, CEO of Hire Talent. I'm really excited about today's panel. We're going to talk about AI. It's been a talk of everything for basically the better part of 24 months, and the race to lead in AI has us moving at a blistering pace. When that happens, things fail fast, and then they overcome the obstacles, which leads to exponential progress. MIT recently published that 95% of AI pilots have failed. This report is a little bit misleading because it didn't get into details of challenges when implementing new technologies. Regardless of whether it's AI or something else, when you're implementing new technologies, it requires proper change management, strong executive leadership, and sponsorship, a willingness to for the staff to adapt to the new tools, which there's always a bit of resistance to change the way things are working. Data readiness and access that's acceptable to the AI systems. Breaking existing processes to create new, more efficient systems. And this report was specifically speaking about pilots, not about stuff that was in production. There's also platform mismatches, and then also skills enablement and training. So in the end, I think when you look at AI, most technical implementations fail 20% of the time because the tech overreaches, but 80% of the time it's because of the things we described above. So my interpretation of AI, where it is today, I call it American intelligence with a tech stack on top of it. And that's because we are kind of in 1997 mode, where the dot-com boom, where we talked about it's going to change everything. And it takes, within 3 years from now, I see the world changing. It'll look different, where hype and reality converge. And I think we're getting closer to that every day. And it might be less than 3 years. So today we're here to talk about the future of AI and staffing specifically. And we have some special guests that will weigh in on the biggest AI trends and the predictions for the future. Our panelists include Erica Novak, Global Head of Customer Success at WorkSum, Marcus Sawyer, Founder and CEO of EQ App, Bruce Morton, Global Head of Strategy, and then Brian Pena, CEO, Founder of Defiant Solutions. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, good to be here.
I think it'd be great to start with if each of you can kind of give me a 30-second background of who you are, what you do, and what your company does. Marcus, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, great to be here and excited to have the discussion. I've spent the last 18 years in HR tech and recruiting. 10 was at careerbuilder.com, and then 5 as a global president of the Adecco Group, responsible for digital innovation. So I was buying, building, and investing in HR tech companies. And at that time, AI was the hype. At that time, that was in 2016. I thought that was the hype cycle. Fast forward now, I've been building EQ, which has really been focused on building an infrastructure layer for AI agents for the staff and the recruiting industry to help them get access to their ICPs. So whether that's their ideal client profile or ideal candidate profile. So speak to a lot of customers in the space who are in staffing and recruiting, have a lot of friends who run these businesses, and just super excited to have the conversation, just share what we've been seeing on the ground.
Welcome. And Brian?
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Ash, and thanks to Marcus, Bruce, and Erica for the panel today. This is something that is very, very near and dear to my heart. I've been in this business for about 25 years. I started out in corporate procurement many, many moons ago. Some of the first contracts I negotiated were VHS tapes and cardboard standee cutouts at Universal Studios. So that gives you some idea how long I've been in the business of procurement and sourcing. Just a real quick point about that. I remember you mentioned the dot-com boom. I remember in the early days of the internet, I had an aunt who once shoved an article in my hand about how the internet was going to kill purchasing and procurement as a role. So this notion of doom and gloom has been something that we've been dealing with throughout our careers. After spending 11 years in various corporate procurement roles, running and deploying multiple MSP and VMS systems at Universal Studios, and then Avery Dennison, I went to staffing industry analyst. I was there for 11 years. Most people know me from my time there, where I developed the CCBP certification and managed the conference content and the CWS Council and things like that. From there, I went to MBO Partners. I was there for 2 years. And for the last 4 years, I've been the CEO and founder of Defiant Solutions. We work with enterprise buyers and HR tech and staffing firm clients on go-to-market, process efficiency, and technological implementation. This is an incredibly exciting time to be in this business. And I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Welcome. And Erica?
Hi, guys. Erica Novak, Head of Customer Success for WorkSum. But I've been in the industry, same thing, 18 years. time. I do not have cardboard cutouts. Ryan, you have me beat on that. But I've been in this industry from a couple different perspectives. So I've been the global buyer. I've built and scaled programs around the world at companies like eBay and LinkedIn. I've been a consultant working with Brightfield Strategies, consulting the Fortune 500 companies to say, hey, have you thought about this? Don't go backwards, go forwards. I've been actually a contractor. So I have the user experience of someone who's had to go through the different processes that we worked out within an ecosystem. And then most notably, I kind of left the buyer world to join tech startups because I was really upset that the technology that we were using was old, antiquated, and in the realms of what we use in the government. And so I wanted to kind of work with companies to bring tech forward. And so my last company was acquired and I've moved on to WorkSome, which really focuses on how to get workers incredibly fast and ready to start with compliance. And so how do we get freelancers started, ready, go in a compliant manner? So happy to be here.
Welcome. And Bruce, my friend, you're next.
Thanks, Ash. Hi, everybody. Well, here's the old guy, 45 years in the industry. At the back end of last year, December 31, 2024, I retired from the corporate world. Previously, I'd been with Allegis Global Solutions for 15 years as global head of strategy. And so this year, I've been having a lot of fun. I have a small handful of tech companies in and around the space, and I'm having great fun advising them on their product development, go-to-market, etc., as well as doing some work with some of the larger enterprises, all things future of work. So great to be here.
So Bruce, you're saying when you retired, you took on 5 jobs.
Yeah. Yes.
I love it. I love it. So first question, where are the biggest trends you see in terms of AI and AI staffing? Who'd like to start?
I'll start because mine's a little different. I think the trend that I'm seeing is that there's a double-edged sword. A lot of buyers are asking suppliers, what are you using? What do you have? What's in place? And at the same time, they're saying, that's not okay. You're putting me at risk. I'm not really sure. And so it's the desire for the want, but also like the rebuke of, I don't know, can you turn that off? I actually want it. So that I feel like there's a misunderstanding of what they're actually asking for and the risk threshold. We talked a lot about LinkedIn, about taking intelligent risk when you're working with new technologies and philosophies and partners. And so I feel like there's a disconnect at companies of what they actually want and are willing to take on when working with their partners, which is leading a lot of, I think, suppliers and staffing suppliers to some of it lead with it and some of it hide it and only show and share when they're specifically asked because they don't know if they're going to be rebuked on it. So it's been that's the trend I'm seeing. There's just a flip flop of what people actually want.
I think that I agree. I think it's also an indication of an awareness that there's something that they can take advantage of, but really no clear vision of how. And I think that there's a lot of noise in terms of it's going to be the panacea and cure-all, and then you have stories in the news about how X% of implementations fail. So the reality, we're at this kind of I think we're at the sort of a plateau of the hype cycle, where we're going to see large amounts of these AI startups be revealed to be a little more than skin engines or small verniers or interface on top of a ChatGPT instance. And we're going to see a lot of them fail because the economics of it just doesn't necessarily work. So just like with the internet boom, we're going to see people who are going to be losers and winners. But I think that the biggest thing in my mind is kind of the plateauing of the hype. And we're starting to see more people kind of questioning the reality of it. That leads to a lot of downstream effects. One of which is the deflationary nature of the value of what everyone does. One of the things about AI is that it enables people to punch above their weight. And for those of us who are small business owners, we leverage AI across all elements of our business. So what it does is it enables people, small organizations, to compete with larger ones, which overall depresses the relative value of what many, many people bring. So in my mind, we're entering a phase of declining like hype, increased usage in real terms as people establish what, to Erica's point, what they want and where it needs to be, but also increasing competition across the industry to differentiate.
Yeah, absolutely. Marcus, what are your thoughts?
So overall, I think context is king. So the context, not only from the AI standpoint, but what are we actually talking about when we talk about the industry at large? The staffing and recruiting industry is very fragmented. There are many different niches that you can be involved in, whether it's exec search all the way to light industrial, where we served Adecco. And then you've got the stage of the organization. So I think until you start to peel back the onion, it's really hard to say who's doing what, where, and how, right? I think at an enterprise level, we've seen some humongous announcements with some of the big players starting to really figure out how they're going to partner, but they need to do something because every quarter they're being pushed by their shareholders to say, what are you doing with AI, right? So we've seen those huge announcements. Then you've got this kind of middle area where they have been thinking about AI, start to do something, but they're just a little bit too big to make a huge shift immediately, and it's going to disrupt the change management inside the organization. And then you've got new, fast-growing startups that've got nothing to lose. And when you see someone that would leave a staff and recruiting firm, especially in the UK on permanent or direct source, they would leave the business and leave with their contact book. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, you can leave with the contact book. And how are we going to continue to build that desk? Right now, people are leaving and then they're powering themselves with AI. We like one person in particular I can think of, we're helping them build a new business from scratch, fully AI powered. They were a nurse, right? But they were responsible for hiring the nurses. So I'm seeing that there's a lot that's happening depending on where you sit and where the context is. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to understand your context to figure out where you want to go. And a lot of people haven't spent that time doing that. They've been thinking, okay, this is AI. This is really exciting. How do I leverage it? Versus this is the problem I'm trying to solve. What would be the best solution for it? And should I use AI or not? So there's a lot of that happening. And the final thing I'll say is it's kind of this bottom up and top down, right? Bottom up is everyone's using ChatGPT for something, right? Whether it's I was using it to compare some headphones the other day in the airport, right? And I got some ads. I was like, wow, interesting. That's on one end. But then the other end, you've got people that are using it to develop strategies. Mm-hmm. So, and they're not joined up. So I think that it's very disjointed. And then we've got this whole great restructuring going on, which I'll talk about in a second. But there's a lot happening depending on where you sit. And I think the context is key.
Yeah, I agree with that. Context is key. And I also think the companies that aren't adopting this, they're having a shadow AI group inside their organizations where individual employees are buying ChatGPT themselves and using it. So it's better to kind of bring it under control if you're gonna have it in your organization. Bruce, I'd love your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think that is the biggest trend that, I don't know anybody, and I know a lot of people, I don't know anybody that doesn't use ChatGPT every day. Not in our industry, but my 20-year-old son just moved to Bali. He's a digital nomad. He's going to live there for the next 2 months while he builds his AI business for influencers to sell their wares. I mean, he's 20 years old. He dropped out of college. His mother went berserk, and I'm like, get in there.
You should have on this podcast.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a whole other story. But, he couldn't have done that 6 months ago because he didn't have those tools at his fingertips. And I think that, and you mentioned LinkedIn, Eric, and I think this does remind me of when LinkedIn first came out, an HR director said, hey, Bruce, how do we stop our employees using that LinkedIn thing? I'm like, you can't. Don't be a jackass. It's on their phone. You don't control them. Yeah. So organizations, whether they like it or not, a lot of their strategy at that level, as you said, Marcus, is now being at least written up by a combination of Copilot after a conversation with a few bullet points and then ChatGPT spreads it out. I mean, that's what's happening. And organizations, I guess they have a choice. They can turn a blind eye, they can try and control it, or they can embrace it.
Well, I want to point something out, which is something that is always an important element. And I think those are excellent points, Marcus and Bruce. The one thing is that because we know something doesn't mean that everyone else knows it. And that's a real sort of thing called the theory of knowledge, where just because I know something, I assume other people don't. I was at a conference a couple of months ago, and there was a VP of HR at a brand name company who stood on the stage and said, I finally downloaded ChatGPT to figure out what all the hype was about. And that attitude is still prevalent in a lot of people. And because we are, by our very nature, tech-focused nerds, I assume we're all nerds on this phone. That's why we're here. We tend to think that people know the same things that we do and see things the same way. There's a whole swath of people who have no idea other than what they see on the news and haven't really interacted with these technologies. So there's still a lot of penetration to be gained, both good and bad. And I think that's just important to really point out that while we have a universal perspective and we see these technologies on a day-to-day basis, and I can speak personally to your point, Bruce, the things that we can do at Defiant, you couldn't tell that we're a team of 10 or a team of 10,000 with the output that we can produce. So there's a long way to go in terms of where it all ends up. And I think that's just an important element to recognize that a lot of people are still trying to figure out what it means at the very basic level to contextualize your comments, Marcus.
Yeah, and there's interesting because some companies are afraid to acknowledge or embrace it, and then there's others that are, if you don't use this, you're not going to be here. So Brian Armstrong, for example, the CEO of Coinbase, he told all his developers, I want you to start using ChatGPT and LLMs to start coding some of your fundamental models and then build on top of that. And so they said it would take him like 3 months. And then he said, okay, I want you to install this week. And then those you aren't using it, let's do a call on Saturday and explain to me why you're not using it. And so if you give them a good reason why, so some of them are on vacation. So he's like, okay, I get it. You're on vacation. The other ones that couldn't explain why, he let them go. Because he's like, we have to be an AI first company. And so there's that part. And then there's the other side where everyone's just afraid of the risk. And I'll tell you, on my side, clients ask me do we use it? Do we agree to use it? And then we say yes. And they say, will you agree not to use it with us? And then I show them case studies will actually help them with their risk management. So for example, we use it to validate whether somebody's a fake candidate. And with all the stuff with North Korea, sending in employees to try to hack into their company data. It's like, oh, wow, we do need to use this because it's going to help us prevent that from happening. Right. And we use Marcus's tool for lead gen and also for sourcing. And so if you can show them the value propositions, like you said, Brian, that not everyone understands it, then I think companies are more willing to adopt it and not be as scared of it.
I just want to double click on that because I think it goes back to the context piece, which is really around what are you trying to solve for? Because it doesn't matter about the technology. At some point, there's the kind of this exploratory area where it's like, okay, well, what can this do? So you have to have an understanding of it, but what are you actually trying to get done? Mm-hmm. If you know that, then you can provide the solution for it. I think that there's a lot of tools out there, not many solutions. And it's kind of like figuring out how you bring that together inside of the context of what you're trying to get done.
Absolutely. And so jumping on that, there's so much noise out there with AI. What do you think is real in terms of the products and capabilities currently being offered within the staffing space? Erica, do you want to start with that maybe?
Yeah, I think I'm seeing a lot of content creation. If I think about, Brian, a little bit to your point, 1-man shop, 5-man shop, 10-man shops, folks who have outsourced X, Y, and Z. A lot of websites are terrible. It's the last thought, they slap it on or whatnot. So I think when I think about the marketing content that has now been at people's fingertips have been one of the things I've seen where they actually feel much more like a corporation or an enterprise or something that you would want to engage with versus stock images. And, it's one HTML site. I think candidate engagement is something I'm seeing a lot, redeployment within staffing is such a terrible percentage, right? 5% of how do I keep these candidates engaged? There's no sense of ownership or relationship anymore. So I've started to see a lot of candidate engagement where you're keeping folks warm, availability or whatnot, so you can repopulate them. I think obviously the literacy, like Brian, to kind of what you're saying, there's a lot more of people being able to upskill when they're talking about who their clients are, what problems they're trying to solve, and to speak intelligently to that hiring manager in a different way. Before it was just a website search. So I think those are a couple of things that I'm seeing doing really well. Sourcing matching, I think, has gotten the most hype and the most critique, right? Are you allowed to match? Are you not allowed to? Are you allowed to make an assessment? So I think those are the ones that have gotten the people, to Marcus's, your point, the solution of how do I sort through 5,000 resumes that came in and get the ones out who shouldn't be in there and stack rank them. That in a TA's world is the goal that they want. How do I get speed of productivity? I want to hire Erica Novak as quickly as possible and sort through those. But that's the one that's got, I think, a laser focus on, is that okay? Are there rules about that? We'll talk about the Workday lawsuit coming up or whatnot. And then lastly, I think interviewing, right? The annoying interview scheduling. People are starting to put things together of how do I not have to hire. At LinkedIn, I ran a team of 40 recruiting coordinators to interview schedule. Really, their focus was interview scheduling and coordination packets. How do I get that faster so the candidate can get to the interview and the hiring manager faster? So I think those 4 groups are where I'm starting to see the most movement on. Brian, what do you think? Same or different?
I think we're certainly seeing conversational AI for sure. You know, chatbots as kind of tier 1, tier 0 sorts of things. Resume parsing, you're bringing up rate intelligence. Some companies are doing more advanced things, but I think really, to Marcus's point, you want to focus on what are you trying to solve, and implementing things that create a negative candidate and client experience at the sake of efficiency goes a long way. I remember I was at a conference again a long time ago, and somebody said the best investment they ever made was a chatbot as opposed to a call center. The reason they liked the chatbot was because everything was logged. It was on 24/7. They were time-stamped. If someone put in the chatbot they want to do a benefit change, that stuff is memorialized as opposed to relying on human intelligence. People are happy to interact with the tool to the extent that it's a necessary element to do it. If they choose, if it's a choice to interact with a human or have no benefit at all, then they're going to have a negative experience. So a lot of times what you see is people are happy to talk to a customer service chatbot if they're resolving a problem in real time, but not if they have a customer service expectation. So when you look at these solutions, you need to really understand what are the parts that you're implementing for efficiency and overall service improvement, as opposed to the inefficiencies that come with dealing with people. So if you're thinking about that, then you have to take a look at the entire stack and determine which elements are critical to be differentiated. I'm really interested, Marcus, in learning more about that one client who's creating a virtual staffing firm on the back of the EQ engine, because I think that's the greatest sort of expression of the billion-dollar company of one, which is, I think, really where all of this leads. One of my favorite stories is to think about, I think it was VibeCode, the VibeCode product. That was a single solopreneur who developed the solution and developed it and had an $80 million exit with one employee. Mm-hmm. That's the sort of stuff that I think this goes to. And it speaks to where the future of a lot of organizations are going to be in terms of managing their own internal headcount.
Yeah. Yeah. Lovable is a great product as well for that.
Yeah.
Bruce, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Erica and Brian said. I think the only thing I would add to that list would be I'm seeing more companies now, tech companies, position their value prop as reducing the number of applications. For years and years, it's all been it used to be about who had the biggest database, right? Then we all shared the same one, so that didn't matter anymore. But now it's like, yeah, we can get you all these candidates to apply, and that's just a pain. So now it's interesting to see the language starting to turn. Well, with AI, we can now make sure that only the most relevant are actually going to apply for that position. So you've only got 10 to reach back out to instead of the 1,000. So I think that's an interesting advancement. And it's a tricky line, of course, because how are they getting down to that 10 from the 1,000 with the AI? But yeah. I do think that it's an interesting value prop that trying to give that recruiter more of the personal shopper experience as well as the candidate.
Yeah, narrowing the filter more efficiently, definitely.
And so I'll add 3 separate points. The first one is similar to what Bruce just said. We have a framework called RIV, which stands for relevant, interested, and verified. So that is real. You can find relevance because you have an idea on what you're looking for. So the relevance is determined by you as an organization. Interested is like, is there a sign that this person may be interested in either the role, opportunity, or connecting with you on a business? Verified is, are they who they say they are, right? And that's hard. It's getting harder with AIs as well. So those 3 elements, relevant, interest, and verified, are real. What you decide to do in between that or after that, not too sure at the moment. And then we've got source, screen, and schedule. So with the sourcing, finding the right candidates, right? Like based on what you would like or the right clients, we have a MPC opportunity. Find your most placeable candidate. You can put that candidate into a system and then it can spit out potential clients for you, right? So you're feeding the data. Again, it goes back to the context. The screening, what are you screening for? If you're screening for culture fit, probably not the best use of AI. If you're screening for credentials, amazing, because it's hard skilled. So again, what are you screening for? And then the scheduling piece, to Erica's point, like we actually haven't got that far yet as a company. So that's something we're thinking about. But there are companies that are doing that really well. And if I was to spend time on anything, scheduling is an absolute nightmare. So that should go away. But the final thing I was going to say is kind of like I've said 3 different things on those 2 topics. But the final point, if you think about, you talked about at the start, Ash, about the internet and the boom of the internet. There was, and I was doing digital transformation for the Adecco Group. The promise of digital transformation, generally speaking, if you think about it, was that there was availability to get connected to your storefront, your shop window, your front end when other people were sleeping, where people were sleeping, right? Because it was online, it was digital, it was available. And it goes back to Brian's point around time. I think the value in the AI agents is being able to connect with them at a time when people are not always available. So there's a use case where we've screening agents able to screen talent, but on the weekend or at 4 a.m. because that's when the candidate was available because they just finished a shift and they could then send a message, but a recruiter wasn't available in that particular area. So can you ensure that the AI is additive to what you're doing? When you had a storefront and a retail business, you didn't just shut down the storefront and the retail business. You added your website. Now you add your agents, and this becomes part of your front office. So I think it's really thinking about the collection of more ways for you to go to market with your clients and your candidates.
So Marcus, speaking of that, because I think just for educating the population, the word agentic is vague to many people. Can you explain what an agent is and how it can be used in terms of staffing? Because I like the way you described it when we went to a conference at Transform, I think it was in March.
Yeah, so the frame, it's all about frameworks because it just helps me remember because there's so much stuff going on at the moment, right? And it's like, well, how do you bring this down? And so the framework that I came up with was OTT. So an agent has characteristics of OTT, has an objective that is what it needs to get done, right? So that's the job to be done, right? Mm-hmm. The T are the task. So how is it going to do that job? And the second T is a tools. What tools does it need to get that job done? Is it your ATS? Is it a database? And that's really around the context. So OTT. And the way I thought about it was like, if you're going to outsource a task and offshore it, you have to give an objective, you have to give tasks, you have to give tools. Just the same thing that we do. It's like a job description. Look through the job description. What's this job? What's the title? What are you going to be doing? What are the tasks? How are you going to get it done? And what are the tools? We're programming agents in that way. And we all know this in the industry. We've almost just got to look at, okay, like what's the analogy between the two? And if an agent could do this job, and that's to your point earlier, around CEOs we're looking at job descriptions. We've actually got this thing internally where we say, okay, if we're going to hire, could an agent do it? How do we determine that? Break down the job description. What parts could we do versus the agent? And then is this a co-pilot opportunity or is this an agentic opportunity? So that's how we're looking. And I think customers are going to start looking at that as well if they're not already.
Man. Can I add to that incredibly insightful? I think that's a great framework and I totally get it. But I think I'm always trying to speak for people who don't quite understand some of the basic elements. Just for everyone on the phone, an agent is an autonomous technology that's able to perform multi-steps without human oversight. So when we think about LLM or ChatGPT, you have to have a series of prompts to produce an action. With an agentic resource, what you're able to do is get an instruction, and it's able to execute against that instruction with no human interaction at all. And that's kind of the top line definition of what an agent does, supplemented by Marcus's really detailed framework, which I love.
Definitely. Bruce, can you give me some examples of where clients have used an agentic platform properly?
No. I can give you an example of where they're trying them out, but I wouldn't say properly. If you hadn't said that last word, I might give an example. I mean, there are numerous agents. You know, my old company, Allegis, that we built started 5 years ago. So we all know this stuff isn't really new. ChatGPT is new, but the ability was there before that. So, you know, we had over 12 million actions that used to be done by human beings are now done by these agents, and they keep getting better and better and more refined. But interestingly, then a lot of those started out as actions, and then you end up grouping a few of those actions together, then it becomes an agent.
Mhm.
So we came at it. If we started it again, I think we'd probably get there a lot quicker because we'd go straight to agent. But in those days, 5 years ago, a lifetime ago, it was more about task by task, action by action, as opposed to thinking of it as I think folks are almost thinking it more as comparing that to a human being.
Yeah.
So there were different elements of that, what you wrap up in one task versus 10 actions then become the thing. So.
And I think that's a big important part to talk about, because the difference between automation and agentic.
Yeah.
In today's world, it's so conflated together, right? Where you can sell, hey, I'm going to use AI, but it really is just RPA or building something out, right? It just becomes you're completing, to Brian, to your point. I've started a task and I completed a task in a repetitive loop. That's available now in most automated tools, right? And so I think we're seeing a ton of this is AI versus this is just classic automation technology. So that becomes an interesting point. And Marcus, I love your thoughts on this, is when you're talking with your clients about how this is different AI agentic focus versus just a repetitive automation loop. How are you distinguishing between the two?
Yeah, I have a slightly different perspective. I think a human is in the loop. Because there are different points in a time where you need approval steps. And you can have an agent go out and do a task and then ask you for something, and then you can say yes or no, and then it continues. An example would be us building like software technology. Like I build the agents myself, but the coding platforms that I'm using are agentic, but there's approval steps. And so this goes kind of back to that framework of like, if the agent could go out and ask you for your feedback in the context of the environment. So again, it comes down to the context. Difference between automation and not. Automation is one and done. It's decision tree. These are the steps I want you to do, and it's a mathematical equation. Whereas what an agent will do is it will reason, come back to you, or it will reason with itself. So you can have chain of thought reasoning. If anyone's using ChatGPT now, they've probably seen ChatGPT move from the standard one to ChatGPT 5, right? And it's just on fire. And then sometimes you put an input and it comes out really quickly. Sometimes you put an input and it says it's thinking. So it's doing chain of thought reasoning when it starts saying, I'm thinking. If you want to activate that and it hasn't been activated, let's say the thinking hasn't been activated, all you say is, I want you to deeply reflect on your answer before you give it to me. That's a prompt trick. Now, that then goes to another agent and then ask the agent a question, what do you think? So it's about critical thinking. Really what the agents are doing, the difference between agent and automation, there's a critical thinking step in there where it's weighing up the options and then coming back with some idea of how it could do the task.
I do think it's interesting, and it's very telling that this phrase that is now common, the human in the loop, right? And I get it, and I totally agree with it, but does that mean we're now working for the tech? It used to be you put technology in the loop, right? And now can we come in, please? Can we pop in here and make some decisions here?
Bruce,
So
you know what? I thought about that in 2016, and I've done a presentation for LinkedIn on the future of AI and recruiting. And on stage, we had a human in the loop, and no one realized it. You know what that human in the loop kind of technology was that was telling us what to do? It was Uber. So the drivers are AI was their boss then. Right? Where to go, where to pick up, how much you get paid.
Yep.
So it's been happening. It's just kind of in plain sight, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Brian, your thoughts?
I think I agree with everything. I think that the agentic elements oftentimes are sold as agentic, to Erica's point, but really they're just a string of automations and RPA actions looped together. I don't think that they're all mutually exclusive. For example, Marcus talks about how we have agentic's functionality with approvals in the loop. There still is a multi-step process that happens on the other side of that that's driven by automation. One of the things I always recommend people become familiar with are a lot of these automation engines that are really consumer friendly, like Make.com, Zapier, and N8N are just some that kind of come up. I highly recommend that anybody who hasn't become familiar with these, because it allows you to interact with different sort of automation technologies and different functionalities and really see it kind of realized in real time. Now, maybe they're not certainly appropriate for large scale use, but they are great tools to be able to do that. And what you can do with these applications is create infinitely complex ecosystems. The reason I bring that up is because oftentimes an NetM or a make.com flow could be sold as an agentic solution, but really it's just a string of automations tied together.
Yeah.
This is such an evolving field, and I love the example you have, Marcus, of the Uber being the overlord that controls us all, kind of like the Matrix that we all remember from our youth.
So Brian, here's another way to look at the human in the loop idea: is that if you look at most AI is doing critical thinking, is trying to find get to the shortest path forward as quickly as you can, right? And so there still needs to be human to kind of audit to make sure the thought process is correct, right? At some point.
100%.
And if you look at like the Workday lawsuit, right, they're facing a collective class action suit where they're saying that AI is screening candidates who are over 40 and filtering them out. And then I started thinking about that. So we're getting rid of people over 40, and then we're not hiring people under 28. So really, there's a 12-year window of working, right?
30-year-old world right now.
Well, I think the Workday issue and the use of AI becoming so pervasive, I think, creates so many different interesting challenges, not just unintended bias, but also how do you differentiate? How do you differentiate candidates? We're all using the same applications to sort from the same pools. How do you differentiate? At the same time, you have candidates who take your job description, post it into their own AI, and create a resume that's specifically tailored to that. So you're no longer dealing with humans anymore. You're dealing with one AI interpretation of the job requirements, because people put a high order thing. They'll go into their job, into their technology, say, I need a programmer, a project manager, spits out a requirement. They don't know any better, so they say yes. They post that to any number of applications. I'm a candidate. I see that. I take the requisition and say, format my resume or my response specifically for this one. And then they create something tailored, and they make it so it's just ATS friendly. And then all of a sudden you get out the human's no longer relevant. You're dealing with machine to machine. So I think what we're going to see in the future is kind of a go back to basics. And I don't know necessarily what that looks like, but I do think that it's going to revalue things that historically have not been super valued in our economy. In the past, for those of us who have kids, we say go into STEM, go into computer science. Now that would be the last place I would recommend anybody go into. It's going to revalue some of the things that make us all unique, creativity and the ability to connect with one another. Those are the things that are going to be in short supply in this coming age.
Yeah,
it's interesting, Brian. On that example, I was at a HR conference a couple of months ago, and the whole audience got really heated about the amount of people that are doing that now. They're saying they're taking our job description and they're creating the resume and they look perfect for it. And they're all, yeah, it's awful. I'm like, hang on a minute. Does anybody want to hire somebody that doesn't have the nous to do that? Well, that's a good point. So I don't know where you go with that. Right?
It's like you use the AI to evaluate the candidate. They're using the AI to respond to you. Who's right? Who's wrong?
Yeah. Right.
I was with a client last week in San Diego, and they run a decent sized staffing firm, 200 million plus. And one of the things that they're struggling with at the moment is they've got their employees that are using ChatGPT, dressing up a candidate to look really good, get sent over. But what the hiring manager is accepting is the resume, not the candidate. Mm-hmm. And in contract staffing, that's a challenge because you brought someone in to fill a gap. So I think that the biggest challenge is misrepresentation. Oh, yeah. And then for the staffing industry at large is losing trust. Because the main thing is having that relationship with the hiring managers. Like if I call you and I say I've got someone that's really good, you're going to trust and believe me because we're going to come back over and over again. And I think that what we'll see, and to the points made earlier, the evolution will be that the phone call and the connection will be the premium service. Yep. So what we've just done in the industry, just for the sake of doing it, that phone call and that connection and spending time will be the premium service. So how do you get everything done in the back office so you can spend more time doing that? 100%.
You saying we're just using our phones for real again and not just screening all the robocallers coming my way?
You know what? I called someone the other day and they were like, I call people randomly still to this day because I like the phone and like, oh my God, when I get a call from you, I'm like, what do I do? Do I get like, is it a Zoom? I was like, no, just pick up the phone because we just talked.
It's like getting the postcard in the mail, right? You don't ever get it anymore.
We should start sending letters again.
Right? Are you saying I have to start answering my phone, Marcus? Because I just don't. If I don't recognize the phone number, I never answer it. So you're saying I have to do that?
No, but I'll call you 5 or 6 times.
Okay,
That's what a cold caller does.
That's what
I'll call you at 6:30 a.m.
I'll answer it then.
So next question, I don't know who wants to take this one on, but from a buyer's point of view, a lot of it comes down to thinking about buyers doing it themselves versus the supplier doing it for them. What do you think the most important things are to consider whether to outsource some of these functions or not?
When you say outsource, are you talking about the AI, where the AI sits, or the developing the AI technology?
Using the AI. So it's like, is it better for you to have the staffing agency use the AI filters to sort of figure out the top of funnel candidate, or is it better to bring it into the MSP or the organization to say, okay, we're getting all these resumes from these suppliers, let's let the filter happen there?
6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other, especially the next 2 years.
Yeah,
I think across the board, small, medium, large, doesn't matter. You're gonna have both. I mean, my recommendation on this is everyone should be, right? Typically speaking, when I think about working with on the buyer side, they're in such a form of collecting information for wherever they can, right? So they are trying to understand everyone can use ChatGPT or go to Google or whatnot but they are crowdsourcing the information to then take back to their bosses to hold on to their jobs. I have to get more literate on this as I talk to across the ecosystem of what they know, what they see, what's going on. And then I'm going to share it upwards so it looks like I know what's going on. So I see right now that we're at a literacy period. Everyone's trying to figure out what are the top 5, top 10, to your guys' earlier points. What are the shells? What's going to be consolidated? What's currently used? If I think about, there's some big companies right now who are great. Microsoft, we're doing Gemini. We're over here. Like there's very big pushes on big tools to use. And yet they know there's no sense of control. And they know there's a bunch of other subscriptions that I'll pay $200 a year by myself to be smarter at my job that maybe my company won't do, but it actually helps me or whatnot. So there's a ton of other AI tools that are being used outside of control. So my main point is a lot of what we're being asked about is the buyers trying to figure out where they should go, what they should recommend and whatnot. And then the next 6 months, if there's a consolidated effort to make buying decisions, it's looking at that, or people are just going off and just doing it themselves. And I think that's a good thing. I think everyone needs to try things out, play, pivot. You should not be waiting for another team to tell you what to do or who the winner is. I think another thing I see is in staffing specifically, I see a lot of waiting to see who's it going to be. I don't see a ton of movement to be that one. There's like a weird scarcity of like, if I take this risk and I'm wrong, versus I could be the one that sets the tone. And so we're in a weird shuffle period of don't be wrong, but also don't be it.
Well, the human nature is, prospect theory says that people fear loss more than they desire gain. And so they're going to be naturally risk averse. So the question of, do we do it internally? Do we do it with relying on third parties to do X, Y, or Z? It's really going to depend on 2 things primarily to me. One is, what is your appetite for risk? If I'm a large organization and I'm very risk averse, I'm going to push those things that are risky decisions to outsource that risk management to a third party. And then another one is relative organizational maturity, right? Not just are you ready to adopt AI, or are you going to be on the bleeding edge of anything as a company, but how good is your data, right? That's something we often don't talk about. When you want to deploy an AI solution, you have to start from a good point, understanding what you're trying to achieve. To Marcus's point, what problems you're trying to solve. And if you're sitting on top of really inefficient and crappy processes, and you're thinking and your data is all over the place and inconsistent and not consistently applied, so you're not really ready and mature for it, then in my mind, there is no circumstance in which you want to be able to engage at the enterprise level. That being said, I definitely think when I talk to enterprise clients, I say, put together a core team, sponsor them to a certain extent to be able to evaluate the various tools that you approve ahead of time that achieve your necessary security and efficiency goals, and then build an actual use case and allow them to build those use cases for your organizations, and maybe then after then you can see if they'll be successful in the broader organization.
I'm
So
going to
it's like
respectfully
baby steps.
disagree. I'm gonna respectfully disagree. In a SaaS technology world, I think you're right, especially for a large enterprise. That's typically been the hierarchy of decision making and control.
Yep.
I think we've entered a wild west. I think we can get going on things with bad data. I think we can get things going with bad processes. There has to be an acknowledgement of it, because you don't want to use that as the key dependency, that bad is good. But if you have the realization that bad is bad and you're starting fresh, I think there's a ton of things that you can do and get moving with smaller tools and large tools.
Well, I think maybe you're probably right. So
I add to that a little bit.
nothing to stop you from getting started. There's
Yeah.
nothing to stop you from having very narrow applied AI for solving these particular business problems. But at the enterprise level, there's such a concern around information security, confidentiality, and risk that just allowing people to participate willy-nilly without some controls, I think, creates a lot of problems. I think you need to have some element of kind of structure in how you deploy, as opposed to saying everybody go ahead and get a ChatGPT membership.
Yeah, I mean, I think code, sales, revenue, customers, and a couple data points. I think that's fair. You don't want to just drop that into the other. But process creation, I think, is out there. Sorry, Ash, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, so in the beginning of the discussion, I talked about the data readiness and access that's acceptable for AI systems. So beyond that, it's about if you think about AI, like it's trying to break a paradigm and change the way the world works, right? And so we have to break our existing process. Like maybe the way we do things today doesn't work, right? We have a staffing vendor that plugs into it, MSP or VMS that plugs into a shortlist ratio that plugs into the hiring process. Like maybe part of the thing is that breaking some of those models and coming at it in a different way, right? And sort of changing the way that the world works with acquiring talent. And that's kind of the value prop of AI.
I think, again, like, it's really important to have clarity on your purpose and your mission. So like, if we're trying to climb up Everest and we know that's the end result and that's where we want to get to, the question is what do you need in order to get there? Okay, now, so you have like a laundry list. Now there's a different ways that you might want to do it. Now, if you're artisan, you're going to like climb, like you want to do it in that way. Now you might say, I just want to get as fast as possible. So if you want to get there as fast as possible, the answer is not faster horses. You change the paradigm. It's a car. Mm-hmm. So at some point, once you figure out what you're trying to do,
I love that.
where you're trying to go and what your purpose and your mission is, you can back in, say, is that going to help me do it? But you've got to do that reflection work. And I think that's where you can leverage partners, whether it's Brian, Bruce, or people that are building, like have done this before. Like, because they're going to ask you those questions, like what you do. It's not about the technology. Yep. It's about where you're trying to get to, and then what do you need along that journey to help you get there? And can you bounce ideas with people, or even, and I don't even, and I thought about this before. I think you used to be able to bounce ideas with AI. I'm skeptical of that now. And I think you should start by writing it out on a piece of paper. Once you've got this piece of paper, then you should then take that into the AI, and you should critically think with the AI and say, tell me why my idea is terrible.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you do chain of thought reason, you go back and forth and you get iterations. And then you take that and you give that to your team and say, what do you think of this?
I love that.
So it's kind of using that process to get to where you want to go, because I know my North Star is here, right? Mm-hmm. Like our mission is zero admin. That's our company mission, zero admin. That's it. Mm-hmm. So what can we do to remove all the admin?
So instead of using AI to ask me to validate or reinforce my thought process, you're asking it to invalidate my process, to poke holes in it, to figure out if it's the right solution.
It's very good at that. And it's very good at contextualizing against multiple variables that the mind can't manage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's also very good at blowing smoke if you want that recognition.
Yeah.
You haven't seen the last
it's very good.
What's the last episode of South Park? It is hilarious.
Yeah. Like, if you want to use it that way. It's very good at feeding narcissism.
Yeah,
exactly.
Very specific instructions to tell it to not just tell you every idea is amazing.
Yeah, well, that's a really good idea, Brian. Well done.
Are you seeing that procurement and HR are sort of converging because of AI is enabling that, and you're seeing that the way contingent labor is managed is starting to become more centralized instead of like separate?
I'm seeing massive signals and massive realities of all of contingent labor becoming under HR at some point. The last 12-month swing has been incredible, absolutely incredible. And HR own the majority of it now. I think that what we're going to see as a net effect of that is, because of the crazy world with, nobody's out there full on hiring at the moment because of all the uncertainty. So the HR looks at their TA team and said, well, I've got a bunch of recruiters. Why don't they find my contractors for me? We put some AI in there and we can interrogate our ATS with 3 million people in there. Surely we could fill some jobs.
Yeah.
But that's already happening. And AI is expediting that. So I think that, we are seeing a shift away from procurement. I'm not saying they're washing their hands of it, but they sort of are. And they can go and do their thing and say, okay, HR, you wanted it, it's yours, how about it? So I do think we are seeing a massive, massive disruption in our industry. And I might sound like hyperbole, but I think it's going to be as big as 25 years ago when MSPs first started. And all the staffing companies were afraid they're going to get cut out, so they set up MSPs. If you read the statement from Upwork about why they bought Bubty and Accent, they're going after the whole market. They want to. They not only just provide a few freelancers, they want to be the orchestration engine. All of that ambition is really possible because of AI. So,
I think what we're going to do back, and I completely agree with you, going back 25 years. If you think about the role of procurement has historically been as a management of the procurement and purchasing process. This notion of procurement managing contingent labor as part of their day-to-day jobs is simply an accident of history. You can go back in many, many years and you see the evolution of programs always leads to the most mature programs being integrated into HR. So if you think about a normal procurement process from a procurement perspective, I would be involved in an initiative maybe 1 to 2, 3 years and act as an escalation point. I think, the commercial terms, risk management, contracting, process efficiency, rollouts, those sort of things, those are traditional procurement functions. Ongoing HR strategy and oversight, that is really an accident of history for our industry. So to your point, Bruce, how AI is going to create this universe of orchestration, that is 100%, I believe, the future. And that is 100% an HR role. Procurement should not be satisfying or driving talent strategy by any measure.
So I think the other thing I'd add to that is procurement does a really good job on B2B. They do a terrible job on B2C. AI is individual user, right? So what's the QBR look like? What's the management look like? They historically have not been able to do anything with that type of relationship within a supplier or whatnot. And so I agree with you on a different way of, I think they're going to throw their hands up and say, that's not something that we can do incredibly well. HR focus on the talent, not necessarily the cost and the contract structure. Sorry.
Eric, I also think that because we've broken the compliant risk laws and we've like California's muddled what people should know and pay rates and stuff, that you're allowing HR to take over the contingent side without taking the risks that you normally would have before, because it's now part of the law that you can ask those questions, right? The other question I had for you.
One of the things I'll add, so when I had $1 billion plus remit, when you look at how you're going to get work done, you think of it as permanent, you think of it as contract, and then maybe freelancers coming into the Bubty thing. The final thing that people are not thinking about is like, could AI do this? So there's going to be a question with procurement about resource planning overall. And the staff and the recruiting firms or the MSPs need to start to advise, because CEOs looking at it, like, well, why am I paying? I'll give you an example. Why am I paying for this logo designer?
Yeah.
Why am I paying for that? Why am I paying for this content writer? So as a staffing leader or somebody's providing total talent solutions, you've got to look at the breadth of how the work is going to get done and provide outcomes as a service. So I'm betting on the staffing and recruiting firms, the savvy ones, the ones that I speak to, they want to support their clients to deliver. And this is why you see some of the staffing and recruiting firms moving to SOW work.
Yes.
They're managing the outcome because the margins are higher. And then you look at the PwCs, you look at the Accentures, the Deloittes, where they're spending their money on these AI solutions. So if the staffing firms do not move upstream, it's going to be a little bit challenging. I think that the exec search is still protected for some period of time because it's a relationship build business, but the delivery and the margins will get eroded.
Yeah.
And clients are going to be asking you to do more with less.
So Marcus, adding to that, do you think that contingent labor buyers will be managing people and then also be managing agents and robots?
I don't know if they'll be managed. I don't know if they'll manage the agents or robots, but I think as part of the work, the scope of work. So when you come out of an exec meeting, we all know this, right? Like a big company, you see it at Legis, whatever. It's like, this is the initiative. We've got 5 strategic initiatives this year. How are we going to deliver them? Then we say, okay, let's do the resource. This happens in the boardroom, right? It happens on every quarterly board meeting. Then it goes to the CEO. Then the CEO then sends it down to like me, one of the execs or whatever. We look at it and we say, okay, these are some of the ways I think I can get this done. I know a couple of people. The first thing that springs to mind, so there's like a referral basis, right? We may need to hire, so I need to get my HR business partner in to help me with that. I don't have headcount for this part of the role, so now what I'm looking at is contracting. So I'll engage with an agency. Actually, there's this new thing years ago, freelancing. Could we use that? But I'm like, hang on a minute. We've got 10 roles here that are all communication or video editing or whatever. And I'm giving those examples because they're like, now, who could do video editing? First step is like, well, AI can't do it end to end because that's true today. But what AI powered video editing platforms are there today that are going to cost me a lot less? So this question is going to be asked because procurement are there to find savings.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Any other thoughts?
I think that
I'm very close to my next book coming out soon, and we're trying to create a phrase that when we say talent, it means agents as well. And so if you have any great thoughts on that, DM me.
I have.
But I do think there will be a new term in the future that when you talk about talent, it'll be a different word that means both human talent and agentic talent. I think we have to get to that place.
Absolutely.
I think that, I think that decision making when it comes to getting stuff done, I think the unfortunate fact is the hire is at the end of the chain, right? If you think like a CFO, somebody says, I have a need, I have a project. The question is going to be, can we do it with the existing resources? Can we do it with the existing resources supplemented by a technology? Can we do it with an offshore partner? Can we do an nearshore partner? Can we do it with this? Can we do it with that? And then at the very bottom of that chain is, freelance contingent hire. And I think that's just the nature of the beast, coupled with the fact that AI is making it possible for a lot of organizations to do more with less. I was talking to a VP, a client VP just the other day, and he was saying that his company learned that they could cut 10% of the staff and not have a 10% reduction in productivity. And he's saying at the executive level, they're trying to see how far they can cut before they can't cut anymore. And I think that's concerning and also inspiring for the future of these technologies.
So Jason, let's go.
Look at PwC just announced reduced their grad intake by 1/3. Deloitte are doing similar; they're just not announcing it. So where are those entry-level jobs going?
Oh,
that's a whole nother subject. But
we could talk about that all day, man.
Well, Bruce, I actually want to add to that.
They moved to Bali and set up companies.
That's right.
But that is a legit question. So is AI taking over our jobs? Because if you look at the history of any sort of technology leap, right? We created data warehousing, then we had to hire 1,000 people to clean up the data to put in the data warehouse, right? And then we went to the internet and we had to create all these content designers. So is AI taking over jobs? Do you think they might be taking over our existing jobs, but do you think that's going to create a flurry of new jobs, or are we all screwed?
Yeah, it already has.
I mean, there's over 1 million people doing new jobs in India right now that used to be done in a lesser way in the US, with probably 2 million people doing the same level of productivity. So yeah, it's happening.
So if you think of, like, again, if we go back, e-commerce jobs didn't exist before the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really know what those jobs are going to be that are going to be created. There's a lot of predictions. World Economic Forum, we've done some studies on it. We've got a great restructuring document, but there'll be a creation of new opportunities. And the question is, and this is where I go back to like the agenda, how do you get close to it? Your customers are going to be asking you, how can we do more with less? That's going to be the first question. And then you've got to decide what markets you go into. right? As a recruiting firm at MSP, but like nursing and healthcare jobs, they're not going anywhere anytime soon, like right now. So that you want to figure out like where are the safety areas that I can hang out now, understand, and then I can start to scope out the market and figure out where the new creations are and actually be part of it. How can you be the strategic kind of brain behind it? I think that's where we can move upstream as an industry versus just like waiting for stuff to happen.
But also, Marcus, I think learning from industries that have been doing it forever, like Erica's world, you know, we work some, a lot of digital creative movie making has always been done this way, right?
Absolutely.
First ever. You know, so we're finally waking up to the fact there's a different way of doing it.
And now that's moving to AI, right? So
it's the same thing. Some of our largest customers are in the advertising world, and a lot of it's around production and creative or whatnot. And so some of the conversations we've had over the past 2 years has been, the media talks about it hitting you the most, the hardest or whatnot. And they've said exactly kind of what this team has said is, I'm just doing my job better. I'm just doing better, faster. And yeah, there is some reduction, but overall they're like, no, I'm actually better to do it a higher quality to my customers in a faster way. This is fantastic. They don't have the same fear, which I think it's really important for everyone to see, because you guys are exactly right. This is tale as old as time. It's taking this job, it's creating this one. But typically the people who, if there's going to be fear along this, it comes down to if you're not playful, if you're not willing, if you're not able, and if you're not thinking, then yeah, you do have something to worry about because you're unwilling to move and evolve. And in life, sorry, I'm a Jurassic Park fan, life finds a way. And if you're not willing to, it moves you, right? So, I mean, I think to say none, no, never, silly, but we all know that. But I do think it comes down to an individual's willingness, not waiting for a mandate, not waiting for someone to hand you the answer, the individual willingness to play with the most information we have had at our fingertips ever. If you close your eyes to that, there's not much someone else can do for you to take you through it. All right, that's doom and gloom. Someone say something happier before we end.
No, I'm going to add one final thing, which is it is scary when you're trying to do anything new. And growing is about having some level of discomfort. But there are people around you that also feel that way. So connect with them. Try and connect with people in groups, have conversations. Anyone listen to this obviously wants to learn. So connect with us, connect with everybody here. People are here to guide, right? Like we're all trying to figure it out. We don't all have the answers. So I think just kind of like doing that as a collaboration will be much better for everyone.
No, I love that. Let me add one more to that, because at my last startup, we used to say, you're going to be uncomfortably uncomfortable for the next 2 years because you're really good at this, and yet we're going to push you to a next level. But enjoy the comfortably uncomfortable, because when you come through it, you're going to look back and see your change. And so I think humans are comfort-based creatures, especially in this technology, especially in the United States. We like to be comfortable, and I think the inertia that comes with it is bad. And so to your kind of point, connect, collaborate, but be okay with being uncomfortable over the next year as you learn and realize how much you don't know, and then watch your progress, because just get started. Just get started.
Totally.
I think this is a unique time. There is most definitely going to be disruption of careers and futures, but at the same time, there's never been a better time to start a business or to follow up on that crazy idea. Anything is possible. And, to Marcus's point of building the organization with no admin, I think that's a bold and aggressively optimistic vision. That's what's possible. To your point, Erica, embrace it, be uncomfortable, and don't be afraid to try something new. I think these are all exciting changes despite some of the near-term pain points.
100%. Bruce, any last words?
I'll just finish it with a quote from my stepfather, who's in his mid-90s, said to me, "Are you doing anything with that A1 stuff?"
Putting it on my face.
Can't beat that.
I made one last night. So.
I love it. Thank you all. This was so enlightening, and I think people got a lot out of this, and it's always been fun with having all you on. So we'll definitely do this again, and we'll hopefully see you guys in a few weeks.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.